Can you hear me? Hear much? Nice. All right. It's time for the second part of my Xsheets stream. I'm actually kind of happy it got a little break in the middle because that'll be nice for, hopefully these are saving to videos. If they are, it'll be a nice little separation or break between two videos. Because that was like a 35-minute video. I think that's pretty good. Okay. Whew. Hold on, I'm just deleting my old post that said I'm not live. All right, great. Okay. Business taken care of. My computer only has 4% battery, so we'll make it quick. Okay. Essentially, maybe I should just move everything to charger. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Okay. Sorry if this is boring. I'm just setting shit up. Okay, finally back, almost. Okay. If I can even remember what my train of thought was. But let's say we have an existing sequence. We're going to work backwards from the cameraman, the camera worker person who is shooting from an Xsheet. This person takes pictures of all the cells, but these cells are like already worked on a bunch earlier in the pipeline. So the step right before this is ink and paint. Disney famously employed women to do ink and paint because he thought women knew how to do makeup, so they would be good at painting cells and not have any input in any aspect of the creative direction or storytelling or information going into the films, of course. But that was ink and paint. And then the step before that was animation, which was the famous 9 old men in Disney terms. But a lot of crews just kind of did all this stuff by themselves. Disney was just one of the ones that did a huge, really assembly line style production. But most studios had a specialized camera person whose specialty was in reading and photographing Xsheets. And apparently, the one who worked for Ghibli, or the studio that Miyazaki worked for before Ghibli, I'm not quite sure, the camera woman who took things from the Xsheets was like, apparently like just worked ridiculous hours and was just doing this photography constantly over and over and over and over from Xsheets. Oh wait, is that true? No, I think it was the scene checker, not the camera person. The camera people also had really heavy workloads at one point, which is interesting or like surprising because you would think that with how long it takes to do animation and ink and paint, it would like kind of be slow, like a slow paced trickle of sequences or animation sequences or whatever. I don't know. Just kind of rambling or musing about it. But we're going to make one now, a little model based off of an Xsheet. So I'm just going to show you how we're going to do that with these little assets or mock-ups that I've made. This is a film strip. And these are each separate individual animation cells. Hold on a second. That's better. All right, animation time. I have an Xsheet in here. So imagine that we have a bunch of finished cells. In this case, I do. So, yeah, actually, I'm going to tear this one out too. So, this is an Xsheet that I wrote for these assets. Wait, what? Yeah, that's right. This is the right way up. Okay, there we go. So it's supposed to be like that, handing it to you. And so each of these is on a separate cell. Is anyone still watching? Raise your hand if you are. So each of these is separate, right? And each of these on blue is meant to sort of interlink or correspond with like one of these blue cells. Oh, nice. Well, I'm glad you just got back on because I just like rambled for a bunch of long ass time about nothing. But I'm back on it now. So what I'm first gonna do is like take a Sharpie and I'm gonna number these because I forgot to do that when I actually made these. So I'm just gonna take my trusty black Sharpie, which stays on cell pretty well. And yeah, I meant the sequence to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these, I don't know why. Oh yeah, I'll just use black Sharpie again. This is like a little cell drawing of a used tissue. This is a key, and this is a cigarette. So I'm gonna do A, B, C. What I'm basically doing is by numbering them and giving them letters here, and this is also going to be 1, so 2, 3. So by making a little label for each cell, you're giving it a name or a writable sort of identity that you can use to match with this actual cell. So essentially, by giving each cell a letter or a name so that each one can be distinct from every single other cell, but the name should also sort of correspond to what the cell is in relation to other cells. So you're usually going to have a bunch of numbers if you have a regular animation sequence, right? So you would number it because the numbers have to match up with the exposure sheet because they were animated to an exposure sheet or to the concept of a linear timeline. And they would just play perhaps on 2s or at a slightly staggered rate in sequence though, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've animated sequences, like I think I made a film where every shot took an average of about like 50 drawings. Like 50 of these of something like a hand moving in like a chain of motion or a bunch of different motions in sequence or something. It really adds up. Like every shot, 50 drawings, and some of them went over 100, like 100, 10, 20, 30. I don't know. Other people, I'm pretty economical compared to a lot of animators who just draw and draw and draw, you know. But it really adds up. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, luckily, cells and layers are a great way to save work. So I've given all these a number now, and we're just going to pretend that this film strip, which is what this is a representation of, doesn't have anything on it. So this is the film strip we're going to be working with. Blank film strip. Blank film strip, an Xsheet, and a bunch of cells. This is what you're given, essentially, when you are a camera person. These are the materials that you're given to work with. This is the instruction sheet that tells you how to organize them or orient them. Each of these, it organizes them in a stack, in like a really linear one-dimensional stack, because that's what a film strip or a video or a timeline of any kind has to be in order to be functional and reproducible. So that's a little bit about that. Any questions? Anyone? Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to talk about before I move on to the next step, or anything that's bullshit that you want to say I totally got wrong, or anything like, what the hell, I don't get it. Please let me know, because, I'm not the expert, really. Well, I haven't actually started anything yet, because I'm about to start following the Xsheet out. These are just the materials that I've been given. Like, we're going to see, essentially, what it looks like when they come together, or if they come together. We'll see, And Brandon, right now I've been using this, but don't use this. Decocolor, it's a good brand of paint marker. I guess people use Molotov a lot, or Posca. Those are the exact same thing, pretty much. They're all like acrylic paint markers. These are just really convenient because there's not a lot of colors, and you can you can register your color to one another, so you can have a bunch of reproducible fixed colors. It makes it easier to kind of, I'm all about mixing colors, of course, but just saying, if you're doing cell animation, it's pretty economical. It saves a shit ton of time if you just use color straight out of the paint jar and then build your blendy backgrounds based off of that. But mixing colors is fun, and if you're good at it, it can be really fast and not really affect the pipeline. But yeah, I mean, you can also blend paint markers if you want, but that's just super not accurate. Paint markers are acrylic. They just dispense acrylic. They're kind of like a felt tip that oozes acrylic out, and you'll see that it's pretty thick. Like, you kind of like squish it on. So it's just an acrylic in a pen form. But I used acrylics when I made my actual film, which took a lot of time. That was all acrylic, or screen printing ink specifically. But I don't really recommend that because it's not very opaque. So we're gonna do this thing. Are you ready? So first, animation cells are alternative clear plastic. This is the brand I use. It's called Precision Imaging Products. It's the best. Its transparency is essentially for, you can print on them with a inkjet or a laser printer, and they don't stick together like static, like Staples brand or Apollo brand does. They're super staticky, and these aren't. And they're dope, and they're also cheaper. I don't know, they're just way, way better than every other cell, so highly recommend. And yeah, they're for like overhead projectors. Yeah, let's dive in. Unless anyone has more questions. Okay, so to understand the Xsheet, first we're going to have to understand the nature of this, which is the end format, the end format of film or a movie, or the visual images of a thing, right? A movie or a show. So let's take an inquisitive look into a frame of film. So what's in here? This is one frame in a sequence on a film strip that's meant to be played with every single frame running in order from start to finish at a constant rate of 24 per second. One frame of film has an image printed on it, and the main difference between this frame of film and a cell, because, you know, like, the Xsheet is the set of instructions that you use to translate this group of cells to this film strip. That the group of cells that you're given by somebody else, and this that you're given by somebody else, translating these things to a film strip. That's what the Xsheet does. It's a translation tool. And what we need to understand about this that separates it from, you know, separate cells is that this is what I like to call a baked image. And what that means is, even though the film strip, when projected, it's, you know, technically see-through because the light is shining through it to project it onto a screen, the screen is what we view it on. So the screen is baked. And what I mean by baked is that every grain of the image, or if we're thinking about, nice. If we're thinking about digital files, then every pixel of the image, because, as I said, a video file is basically works the exact same way as a film strip, just with a few modifications for performance and stuff. If this were one image in a sequence of digital images or a digital video, then each pixel would essentially be accounted for or baked. And what I mean by accounted for is opaque. So if we have, you know, if this is a film strip, like made of film, and these are celluloid cells or sheets, each with a different animation image on them, like a painted sun or a flower or a bus, then basically these are, you know, the difference is that these are see-through. Light passes right through, and we can see what's under it, which is usually a background, and usually that doesn't move. It just stays in its place, while these get removed and replaced in sequence on top. So these are transparent, and you can see the background through it, but this character covers up the other thing. But the key difference is that if you want, you can separate them. You can take the cells and put them on a different background and take another frame of film or another exposure later. The same cell on a different background. You feel me? Ever seen that? So, once again, I want to reiterate that I'm mostly explaining all of this stuff because I want this to be understandable to non-animators, and I don't know if I've done a good job of that. So, I don't know. You know, we'll see. But so, the key difference is that they're transparent. And in a video file, it's the exact same thing, because let's say maybe in a video image software where you're compositing different things on top of each other, you might use little, we can think of as cells, which are separate images. And, you know, like this is a separate image, but it's also a pixel grid of pixel instructions. This just kind of gets placed onto the other thing. And if the instructions say obscure the other pixel, it'll take it over and obscure it. If the instructions say leave it transparent or blend with it, you know, this image will blend with it. But this is more like this than it is anymore like a film strip, because a film strip, as I was saying before, is baked. So baked meaning opaque. You know what I mean? Baked meaning like this is grass, this is flower, and this is sun and clouds, but the back is blue. You know, there's no transparency here. Every single thing is covering up everything in the image, right? So this is all baked. It's a baked image. It's a flat rectangle. It can no longer be separated into its parts like these. So that's what the model is here. This translates this, which is a group of separate images with transparency, translates into this, or this thing I've prepared, which is what this will look like when it's final, when this process has been done and these instructions have been filled out. So, like, these are different images, right? Oh, is the stream dead? Let me know if the stream dead. Let me know if stream dead, because I just saw an ominous wheel that made me sus. So, good, it's not dead. So let's follow the instructions. Ready? We're just gonna toss this to the side for a second and check it later. And we're gonna fill this out as we go, right? So, woo! The first frame, these corresponding to this. Let me just move this over if that's the way I'm going to organize it. The first frame in the instruction sheet says 1, and it doesn't say anything on top of 1, because remember, these go in order from the bottom to the top, stacking. So the first frame is 1, and it looks like there's just a fist there, so I'm just going to I'm going to be the camera, and I'm going to bake this image. Oh wait, hold on, I forgot one thing, which is the background. And I'm going to use just an anime sky. Ready? Clouds, like it. So that's the background, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake these images together. So even though this is a separate thing on top of a background, and since I didn't write a background here, I'm just going to write like clouds. So it's a fist. And that goes for 3 frames, so I'm just going to draw 3 frames. And remember, if you're on the Disney machine and you press the pedal, it's going to snap and take a picture. This is just a metaphor or an analogy for taking a picture, what I'm doing right here. This is, would happen in an instant, and it would fully bake the image, not draw it in layers like I'm doing. So just know that, Anyway, so this is the sky. The sky, the sky. So the reason I'm doing this so painstakingly and not efficiently is because I'm trying to illustrate that a film strip, at least representatively, means opacity and full rectangle filling. So this is like a series of filled rectangles. And essentially when you fill the instructions out and take photos according to an Xsheet, what you're essentially doing is you're sort of translating cutout animation or cell animation into replacement animation. Meaning these are all images of one event, which is one arrangement of like cells. But they're all different and they're all printed on different parts of the film now, right? So you've essentially printed a different physical copy of each full or baked image. And when it gets run through a projector, it's replacing each one at a very fast rate with a little black like flicker in between each one for the shutter. So it's that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is that a baked video file or image file is replacement animation. And so is a film strip. And so is live action film. So if I went and did the entire thing, which I'm not going to draw the entire thing, but I'm going to fill out the rest of this chart and just sort of show you what it'll look like when we get to 4, when we're using 2 layers. So, 3 with the background. So snap, snap, snap. We take 3 pictures of that. Pull this off. I don't care that it's gross. I just tore a bunch of paint off of it. 2, we take 2 frames of this. Oh yeah, let me just mark it as I go. All right, so we took these 3. And now we're gonna go snap, snap, and take 2 of these. This means that this would be filled out by now, these 2 frames of film. Like, imagine we just took 2 frames and added them to the replacement animation sequence. So then, we're gonna go to the next one, which is 3 for 1 frame on the clouds background. See, there's a little number 3 there. And we're gonna go and take a picture. Now, we're gonna get to 4. So this is where it gets interesting, or not, or where it continues to be boring. So 4, we have 1 layer. I know that I'm totally explaining shit everybody knows and uses instinctively and intuitively, just so you know. I hope that's clear. I'm mostly doing this for my own thought organization. Anyway, I'll save the purple hand for later, but it says A. So the used tissue hand, which I'm gonna fill in actually because it got totally wrecked. that goes on top, right? And imagine that this actually looks like a used tissue. It kind of gets composed into a single image. And then what I do is take 2 photographs, and then I actually take this off and replace the cell under it. And then it says A again, so I put A back on. And now I take pictures. Ready? So it's 5 pictures. So now we have a 13 frame sequence. And let's, thanks Cameron. Let's just analyze. Thank you for tuning in, Lou. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. So anyway, I fulfilled the sequence. Now, this would take about this much, which sort of represents, it's about 16 frames, which sort of represents about a foot of film. In fact, this is slightly under a foot because it's from an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet, so it's exactly 11 inches, right? A foot of film is what they used to call 16 frames of film, and that's how people would kind of get paid, is by how many feet they compose. A feet, feet of frames which are taken that get composed out of separate images like this, right? So I just want to count, yeah, we use 6 assets here, which would be 5 frames of hand and 1 frame of tissue. There's an ant on my computer. Oh, all right. Ooh. How long have I been doing this? 42 minutes ago, okay. Yeah, so this is a longer section because I did a lot of fucking around, but I'm gonna edit it. Anyway, so we have 6 images, and we've created here a 13 frame film strip, and that is played on 24 frames per second, so it's a little bit over half a second for 6 images. Depending on how you time and space each image out, or depending on how long you leave your images to be held, you can create what's essentially called limited animation. And before I end the stream, I want to really quickly talk about that, because that's the reason I'm doing this demo. Limited animation is where, let's say in a script, you would have written, let's say, Salvador's hand opened to reveal a crumpled used tissue. And then you would say, here, this is the Xsheet you get after that line of narration is written. Right? Open the hand with paper in it. Then you would get a different Xsheet. And I'm going to write that Xsheet right now. That Xsheet, I'm not even going to draw a grid. It's going to look like this. It's going to be 5, oops, not blue, it's got to be green, sorry. Because remember, I'm using the color as well to indicate not just the fact that it's a letter. It's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But this is going to be held for 2 frames is going to be held for 2 frames, this is going to be held for 2 frames, this is going to be held for 2 frames, this is going to be held for 2 frames. This is another way you can write out Xsheets. You can really write them out however you want. But that's the main thing that it controls, is how long each layer is held on the screen, and whether or not it's reused or reheld. And limited animation is like reusing it. So I would do that, and then I would say these two still are open, so you would still see the tissue paper on it. So I'm going to do just a blue and go, this also has A, and then it doesn't anymore because the tissue paper is gone and it's just been replaced by the hand. So then what I'm going to do is do 1 times 2 again, and then I'm going to do 2, and then I'm just going to jump straight to 4, 5, and these are each going to just be times 1. Oh, except 5, which is going to be times 4. And then this time when it's open, I'm going to do blue cell, B, B. Basically, following this Xsheet is going to mean something new. And I'm just going to draw it in pencil in my sketchbook. We're going to see what it's going to look like based on this. It's going to come right after the previous Xsheet, which is somewhere. It's going to come right after this when the hand is open and A is here. So you see that 5A matches up with 5A. So it's going to be, the open hand and tissue paper still, and then the open hand slightly closed and tissue paper. Then 3, 2, 1, it's going to be, closed again. And this is going to be closed again. And this is going to be closed again because it's the same frame as 1 because I fucked up. Should have just done 1 times 4. Anyway, so it's open. Oh, is that even visible at all? Damn. Here. So the hand is open, but you still see the paper here. And then it closes again, right? I hope you can all kind of imagine what I'm describing. Remember, these are the assets we're working with, is hand open to close. And then we have tissue paper, key, cigarette, and another hand. So the animation right after this closes, and then it starts opening again, and then it has 2 more open-handed arrangements. And this time, instead of A, which remember is this cell, the piece of tissue paper, we're going to do B. And B has the key on it. It's already been registered by an animator so that the key matches up with the hand. So it's going to take the key off and replace it with the next arrangement, which is 4 and then B. And now you see that in the context of an edit, this could look like this. Wait, hold on. All right, so it would look like this. Your hand comes out, opens up. It has the hand with a little piece of tissue paper in it. In other words, this arrangement. Then the hand closes. And then without missing a beat, it opens again, but instead of the paper, it now has a key in it. So what we've created by putting these Xsheets together is we've used our existing assets to create a magic trick, essentially, which is the character opens their hand to reveal a little piece of paper, then closes it, and very quickly opens it again to reveal a key. But the real magic here excuse me for being so corny, but the real magic here is that we've created a little story. And not only that, but we've also we've sequenced actions based on an existing sort of pool of cells that have been reused. And the reason they're able to be reused is because they were sort of made with regard to each other. So you would use a light box if you were using real size cells, and you would make it kind of stacking one on top of another. And basically by kind of writing these, and you can make them, like Jenny was saying earlier, that you can make them pretty simple or easy or like shorthand. And you can also make it without using 24 frames per second as a standard. In fact, I would argue that a storyboard is sort of like a little bit of an Xsheet for actions that are going to be like finished later, or it's an Xsheet for a sequence of actions that are going to happen through the film, and to sort of plan for what the assets are going to look like in the future. So it's just more timed out. Like imagine if instead of 24 frames per second as the spacing standard of an Xsheet, you had a few assets and you could only storyboard from those images. Like imagine these were storyboard images where instead of a sequence it was different faces. You could use the faces as different shots or cuts. And then by writing an Xsheet and having a number corresponding to each face, you could program a little story between people using things you've already drawn. So that would kind of be, I would call that like a lower timeline resolution standard. So like imagine if one of these rows were a second instead of, did I say that already? 1 second. You could be like, intake breath for 1 second, exhale for 5 seconds, cut to looking over there. You know, a second is already, I mean, this isn't even an entire second. It's 21 frames and a second would be 24. So by doing that, you would kind of be planning your stuff, planning your actions out on a lower resolution or a chunkier resolution of time instead of planning direct like animations or motions or arrangements and movements of things you've already made. Thank you so much, J2Rad. I'm really happy that you're chiming in and talking right now because I was really worried that I was going totally off the deep end with that one. But basically, that's kind of the point I wanted to make over the course of this whole Xsheets thing, is that it's a way of writing instructions for somebody else. But the concept of that, you know, it's just a very specific register of time. And if you can just wrap your head around how slow an Xsheet is, with like every single frame needing to have either the same or a different arrangement, like repeating stacks of frames is so tiresome, you know. And I did this when I made cells. I mean, I didn't even use an Xsheet. I just worked off of a file. I worked off of a file that I had used to take like a test video of pencil tests. So, because the timeline is an Xsheet. And that's another thing, that's the ending, is that if you turn a Xsheet horizontally, I didn't want to say this at the beginning because I think this is a really redundant way of saying it, but that's where Xsheets are now, is each of these is a frame. It looks familiar, right? It's Flash. So each of these is a frame. And just like over here, well, like these are our layer names, right? It's like hand. And this is how they used to do Xsheets. So it's like, this is hand, this is tissue, or object. I'll do tissue. So in Flash, if you were drawing digital stuff, each of these would be a separate layer, and then like the difference essentially is that you can move stuff around in its separate form instead of having an Xsheet like tell you that the one chance you have essentially of printing frames in this order onto a film strip is like the one time you're going to use this Xsheet, and then the film strip is like baked in. So with digital, you can kind of move stuff around in, you know, more fluidly, I guess. It's just that instead of moving things around in a digital workspace or a square, you're moving them around in your head, and you have to keep a lot of stuff in your head. That's why Xsheets are kind of hard to write for when you're making animation. It can be difficult to be like, oh, like this many frames, I'm holding this action, slowing in and out. You can like write it down as you go to see what it looks like later. That's what people used to do. They would like write it down as they were drawing the pencil drawings, and then they would test it. And then if they felt like these instructions were a little bit, like the timing was a little bit wrong, they would go back and just erase and fix, or write a new X sheet. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's kind of all I want to say. I have a totally different live stream I'm probably going to do in the future, or it might not be a live stream. It might be like a post or a write-up about Xsheets and how they're used today. So yeah. Thanks, Cameron. Yeah, I hope you can see why I didn't want to say that at the very beginning, because I think that as soon as you figure out that an X sheet is a timeline, then you get bored and you don't want to listen to the actual, like, what it actually used to be used for. Sorry, I totally forgot what I was just talking about. Interested in what? Oh, how X sheets are used today, right? Yeah. I was saying earlier basically that animation is still done on paper, it's just done somewhere else, which is kind of crazy. But it's just a function of kind of, I don't know, global trade, world, like, economies interacting or whatever. It's pretty weird. So, yeah. But, yeah, like, Hanna-Barbera started outsourcing to the Philippines in the 70s, I believe. It just like basically got expensive to do animation, even extremely economical and limited animation in the United States. I'm obviously not the expert, but animation kind of has been outsourced for a really long time. I mean, TV animation especially, and the way that it's outsourced changes and it doesn't, but we in the US a lot of the time kind of forget that in a lot of parts of the world, it's still pretty much like, even in countries with like everyday daily consumer technology is way advanced even than we have in the States, like Japan, it's still pretty much accepted that slogging through paper animation is like the way to do it, Like people pretty much just know that there's no like way around it, the fact that you're just going to have to do a shit ton of work. So that's why Xsheets are used today for digital animation. People use Harmony and paper, and like, yeah, people are like just doing shit on paper. Every show you've seen on Cartoon Network has been animated on paper. Yeah, I gotta learn more about that too, but okay, I don't know. Just going on and on. I'm just talking about a lot of shit that I'm not a total expert on, so once I get some guests on the show, not that this is even a show, but once I get a guest or two on my live stream, we're gonna get some real action where we find out the secrets of how animation is sustained in the global economy in 2019. Is anyone still watching? Raise your hand. Yay, viewers. Cameron and Brandon and Kimberly and J2Rad and whoever's watching. Cameron says, even with perfect calibration in a digital line, there still feels like a disconnect. Well, you should check out, I'm gonna I think for all of you who are still watching right now, I'm just gonna throw down some resources really quick. Things that I've been consuming or looking at. Let me grab my pencil that I like. Hi, Kimberly. Would you say it's handy to be fluent in writing Xsheets? So that's not so much what I feel like. I don't. I think that for me, the point of writing this, not writing, but the point of making this video is more to sort of just lay down my understanding of Xsheets, because I feel like I don't know if I fully understand them, but if I understand them more completely than somebody else, then I feel like I want to share. Or if I can explain or help explain, I feel like that's important, because I found it pretty hard to find clear resources of how Xsheets fit into the larger pipeline. And I didn't really understand the baked image thing until I actually started writing down notes myself and thinking about film or whatever. I don't know, because writing Xsheets, I have actually never really done it when I've animated. So I don't really know. I'm not qualified to answer that question really. But what I do feel is that the thing that I want to convey is that Xsheets are a result of. Oh, I should have just said this at some point during the video. So I'll just say it right now. Xsheets are a result of a movement in the early days of American industrialization of the film industry and animation, where basically these guys, Earl Hurd and John Bray, the inventors of cell animation, had a studio called Bray Studios or something. And a lot of people went from there and ended up making their own studios, like Max Fleischer, and a lot of people who I think ended up having a hand in Disney. And John Bray Studios invented cell animation, and their sort of philosophy of animation or not philosophy of animation, but their idea was like design a system of animation where you could work less through dividing it into certain tasks like a pipeline, or what it used to be thought of as, which was more of an assembly line. So back when you had real machines to make animation, it would be like Taylorian labor. What's that? I will look it up. But anyway, yeah, it's like an assembly line style of making animation. So the Xsheet is a result of that, and it's actually a pretty efficient and like simple way of communicating the way you want something to be done. It's just that most people think of writing it as well. It's scary actually to write an Xsheet, because when you write an Xsheet, you're setting yourself up for a whole nother task, which is to like actually step through it. So if you're working by yourself and you don't need to write an Xsheet, I actually don't, I feel like whatever is in your head, whatever connects the thing, the step to the next step in your head is probably better than an Xsheet. But I do think that Xsheets are done differently at pretty much every studio they're done at. And that kind of means that you have to be in the studio environment and have access to people who know how the Xsheets there are done. So the ideal Xsheet, in a way, would be an Xsheet that on the Xsheet tells you how to do it. So like maybe even printed onto the copy on the top would be a little tiny, succinct explanation of how an Xsheet works. And like, I don't know if that's possible because I just spent 45 minutes talking about it, but ideally it would be really cool just to have an Xsheet that at the top said, each frame like corresponds to a frame of film. This frame of like, and then maybe even if you could make it modular, like it would be like each row is like analogous to a frame of film. And each step in the row is a layer, and it goes from bottom to top. And then you could even have a little visual, like this is the film's. I don't know. It's kind of hard to like explain all that in like tiny graphics that you could print onto the Xsheet itself. But like, if you could do that, I feel like that'd be really cool, because then the material itself would be like a manual for itself. Xsheets are also weird because some people like work and then they make the Xsheet after, and some people work and make the Xsheets while they do it. I think that's another thing. I don't know. Oh yeah. So I was saying like the modular thing. You could even say each frame. You could even say like if the Xsheet has had an instruction that tells you how to do it or fill it in. You could even say have the rows maybe not even correspond to a frame of film. Like I was saying earlier about scaling it for storyboarding and having it be seconds instead. Maybe an Xsheet that had a little form on top that told you how to use it would have a blank space so that the person passing the Xsheet to you would tell you that this is an Xsheet that maps to 1 second per row, or 10 seconds per row, or 5 seconds per row. It wouldn't matter much because the person after that would like take it and know what to do, or like train, especially digitally. You kind of do the same thing. Even if you're photographing stop motion or something, you use Dragon Frame or any stop motion program. You're just kind of taking frames in a stack, So the time it takes to compose each frame in that stack is a factor you kind of have to consider when you're considering like how much work your pipeline is or how much work your film is going to take to make. I personally like to limit my layers to as few as possible because I am a dummy and I do not like doing a lot of stuff. So if I can, maybe I'll just... This is starting to become less feasible to me, but maybe I would just draw two things in the same cell, right? Like I would rather have less cells to be dealing with when I shoot later, right? And even in Photoshop, I like having fewer layers because it gets really confusing. Spend more time like scrolling than you do actually drawing anything. Oh, now I'm seriously talking about nothing. Oh my god. Anyway, yeah. Like imagine there's two things on one cell, but they could have been drawn on different cells and then written into the Xsheet as different layers. Digitally, it's pretty easy to do that. Just cut something out. But manually, sometimes it's easier because later, like easier to bake two things into one transparent cell because later it might be a real pain in the ass to have an Xsheet that has like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H layers. Like, if you have this many cell layers, not only will it be super annoying to change out between every single baked frame, but also your background will be totally muted. Like you might have to draw, like it will literally tint your background yellow because the light that's shining through the transparent cells is like diffuse. So, oh yeah, I was gonna drop some resources. So Cameron, you should look up my friend Jeffrey, who makes cool videos. And my friend Julia made this video called Julia's Desk. That's on Jeffrey's channel. And then, so this is YouTube. Let me just open my bookmarks really quick. Good, I'm glad that makes sense. Rarebit.org is really dope. Thank you. So Rarebit Animation Fiend Wiki is really good. This is really good. It's like a reused animation archive. Honestly, those are really fucking dope resources. This is good. It's like a thing about pans and how they used to use computers to draw crazy pans. This is a thing about cell animation. If you need a little quick refresh, if you're not an animator and you need a quick refresher on cell animation. There's tons of free animation programs online you can use. I use Flash, and I wish I used TV Paint still, but it's expensive. Yeah, that's all I got, really. Those are my best resources that I can suggest. Hope that's enough. Flash is really expensive, and I'm mad at Adobe for making it expensive. Here's another resource. Is this guy, Joe Brand. He's like a YouTube animator. He's so good. He talks a lot about like democratizing animation on his Twitter and making stuff more accessible. He's like one of my favies. Yeah, so good. But on his Twitter, he writes about like peer-to-peer networks, which is so cool. I seriously want to learn that shit. Well, that's all I really got. Bye. Oh, her grease pencil is awesome. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to end my stream. Maybe I'll just draw for a sec. Did I say that already? I'm not sure. Kind of too lazy to even end. Anyone still watching? LOL. Oh yeah, I have more resources then for you. I forgot I was going to mention these. Hello. Context and history of the animation industry from a critical perspective, huh? So, I just picked up this book like yesterday and I started reading it and I'm not very far, but it's just came out this year, I guess. It's called Animated Encounters. Discusses the history of Chinese animation and I'm very interested to read it because it's essentially describes how animation made in China. Well, first of all, it asserts that it's by Daisy Yandu. If you can see the name. So it asserts that a lot of the history of animation produced in China has been kind of forgotten about. It asserts that they had a pretty good, solid, sort of state-funded communist animation style of studio organization that was like going pretty solid for a hot sec, and then kind of fell apart in the 80s. And it talks about like the multinationality of Chinese animation. So that's what it talks about. I'm only here, so we'll see what it really says. This is a book about Xerox that I bought, but I haven't really gotten around to reading yet. I have like barely read any of all of these books. Disclaimer. But Xerox was pretty influential in developing a lot of computer graphics stuff. They collaborated with Disney and Hanna-Barbera on a number of occasions. And this is talking specifically about, and apparently they developed the personal computer or something. So that's kind of crazy. So I haven't really read this at all because I find the writing style to be annoying to read. It just is a little bit I don't know, wow, these incredible, brilliant minds of the computer age paving the way. I'm like, give me a break. But this is a book called The Colored Cartoon by Christopher Lyman. It's about basically, since no animation studio had a black employee for a married in the early history of animation, it talks about the sort of more permeative influences of black people on animation. I'll just let the book speak for itself, I guess. But this is a book called Television Cartoon Shows, which is very dope. And it's an encyclopedia of shows that were on television, and it also comes at the beginning with a really great history of television. A little history of like television animation too, which is cool because that's, I don't know, skipped over stuff. Kind of like the stuff that brought around the end, the demise, the apocalyptic demise of the golden age of animation, as people like to call it. All right, this is running pretty late. Big stuff. And the last one is this book called Hollywood Flatlands, which is just a bizarro book. It's super weird and cool. It talks about animation. I'm also barely into this one as well because it's hard to read. And it's like about avant-garde movements in, like, I don't know, European art and how they influence animation in Hollywood or whatever. And it's also about freaky shit like how Disney hosted Leni Riefenstahl at his studio, the fascist propagandist. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. I'm gonna go for real now. I don't know what future live streams will look like. I kind of don't want them to look like this. I want this one to be in the bag, and future ones will be more chill and more drawing-y. Hollywood Flatlands? It's so good. The stuff about like the expressionist movement is so good. How far are you? Nice. Yeah, it's really good. It's pretty slow for me though because I'm afraid I have a short attention span, so I switch between a lot of shit. Yeah, it's crazy. He is crazy. He was a freaking informant to the FBI. Fucked up. Disney. Yeah. 100% narc. Thanks for tuning in. Great, I'm glad. I hope to do them like more often. I feel like just getting the foot in is the hard part. So I have a shit ton more I want to lay out. Not looking forward to watching this back later and cringing at myself. But it's a necessary pain.